Just Branding. Podcast.
Hello and welcome to Just Branding. Today we have Peter Wilken with us, and Peter Wilken is a brand strategy consultant, author, and professional speaker. He's the founder of Dolphin Brand Strategy, which is a brand consultancy based in Vancouver, BC, and he has quite an impressive history. He was the head of BBDO Asia Pacific and has run agencies for Leo Burnett and Ogilvy too, working for numerous Fortune 100 companies during his time. His book, Dim Sum Strategy, is packed with bite-sized tools you need to build stronger brands, which is what we're going to be talking about today, building stronger brands. So welcome to the show, Peter.
Well, thank you very much. Very kind of you to invite me along, and I'm very happy to be here with you and Matt.
Cheers, Peter. So can we just get a little bit of background about who you are, just so we have some, we know what lens we're looking at this through?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you did a pretty good introduction there, so thank you for that. But yeah, my background was advertising. I mean, typically for those who aren't familiar with it, I used to say, have you watched Mad Men? Mad Men, I kind of caught the tail end of that golden era of advertising. And, I ended up running, as you said, BBDO Asia Pacific across 14 of their markets out of Hong Kong. And I had a ball doing that. I had 11 years with Ogilvy, and before that also with Leo Burnett in Southeast Asia, running their operations there. So the beauty of that was I could work across a wide variety of real blue chip brands, different corporations, different cultures, everyone from AIG and Coca-Cola to McDonald's, PepsiCo, Shangri-La, Shell, Unilever, P&G, Visa, BMW.
You're just showing off now.
Sorry, I don't mean to be. I'm not sorry. That sounds really okay. I've turned all your listeners off these things. Who's this arrogant arsehole? Oh, sorry, you can't say that. Yeah, can you? Sorry.
Not at all. Me and Jacob are just super jealous. That's all it is. That's
no.
All it is.
Anyway, but that doesn't make it. Anyway, the reality was people would look at me and they would say, okay, that's all great. But advertising, when are you going to get a real job? And so after that, I set up what turned out to be one of the pioneer brand specialist companies called the Brand Company in Hong Kong, with a couple of partners, James Stewart, who's doing there, and a guy called Ian Henry. Ian was a whiz kid entrepreneur. He was Hong Kong Young Entrepreneur of the Year. He'd made himself a multi-squillionaire by the age of 26 on the back of China.com, lost most of it at the age of 28, as entrepreneurs do. James was a fantastic marketing guy. And the three of us got together and we kind of said, look, all of us have got backgrounds in brands and brand building. And what we see is that millions and millions of dollars are being spent on these, what we call the superficial packaging of brands, and not to do it down. That's the advertising I've been spending the last 20 years doing, and things like visual identity and logos and brandings, which are important, but not as important as what we call the substance of the experience of what your brand delivered. And we focused our company on articulating and putting together a program which we call brand-centered management, the heart of which was this 4Ds process, and articulating your brand DNA, which was like its genetic counterpart, a kind of living template for replicating desired brand experiences. And that's what we built a company up around. And it was quite interesting because, I went from being the head of BBDO Asia Pacific. BBDO, if you don't know it, is the top creative agency in the world, has been consecutively for the last 13 years. And I used to struggle to get into the CEO's office of my clients because we were still described as the guys that do the ads. But when we were small, impoverished little startup in the basement, and we used to look up at the corner office that I used to occupy from our little basement den, after we'd given the Porsche back and we were bussing into work on our own time. But we could get in to see the CEO of Sun & Kai Properties. It's the biggest property development company in the world, as brand specialists. And we ended up working for them and for companies like AIG and Shangri-La and Swire.
Could I interrupt and ask you, what is your definition of brand? We often ask that at the start of the show, just to hear your point of view. Because you started a company on brand, the brand company.
No, that's absolutely right. And I've heard everyone's popular acknowledgement of Marty Neumeier's definition of that being your gut. And I wouldn't disagree with that, but I would put a different angle on it. I would actually say it is a perception. It's a territory in the mind. It exists only in the mind of your customers. And you can influence and define that in positive ways. That is what a brand is. If you really want it from the consumer perspective, the quote I like is Jeff Bezos's one, which is it's what people say you are when you're not in the room. When you're stripped bare, that's ultimately it. It's what people take out, not what you put in.
Oh, I love that.
I think it's fascinating that little snippet of your story, because it's so easy to fall into the trap, isn't it? To think of brand as the veneer, as the lick of paint, and focus as a business or even as a designer, focus completely on the look and feel of its expression, and completely fail as a business or even as a designer to really kind of move up into that real essence of what the brand is all about. Just out of interest, Peter, what's your thinking? Why is it that is such a common trap that we all come across in our work? What are your thoughts? Why does that happen?
Well, it's a great observation, and without getting too heavy or philosophical about it, there are quite a few reasons. But one of the major ones we found was that around the boardrooms, the key decision makers, the creative thinkers, and the brand, the right brain thinkers were being moved off. So marketing was being devolved away off the boardroom and being put in the hands of the left brain, rational, financial, bean counter thinking types. I'm not necessarily knocking. For some organizations, that's right. But that was one of the major problems. So that the actual value of all of this fluffy stuff, your brand, which they couldn't relate to, was undervalued. The corollary for that is that the people that think the other way, Silicon Valley, right-brained, think Tesla, think all the dot-commerce, their entire organizations are right-brained, and they've met with enormous success. And to me, it's no coincidence that they're the top 10 brands in the world now. So that was one of the things. And as a result of that, people want measurable, tangible things. When they spend money, you can actually see and touch a new logo or visual identity or design. You can get something for your money. But when you're selling a concept or an idea or something that changes somebody's positioning in the mind, it's very much harder to sell, very, very much harder as a concept. So, we still, when we sell strategy, we link it with something tangible like a brand book or an identity or a rebrand. And typically, sorry, long answer to your question, Matt, but it's like a doctor's surgery. You would come in and people say, well, we need a rebranding. We need to freshen up our logo and things like that, And actually what they really mean is we're completely under threat by a changing landscape, and we need to fundamentally reposition our brand to maintain relevance to our consumer target. But they don't articulate it that way. They say, we need a rebrand. So, it's like going into the builder's house and, you come back and they say, actually, you came in and you said you wanted to paint the outside of your house. Well, we've come in and actually, after doing some work around here, talking to your people, what you think you really want is you need to knock down your house and build a new foundation and create a dwelling that's more suitable to actually your current needs. But if you did that up front, and unfortunately, we would do that, you'd scare a lot of people off. But being honest, sometimes you get the right clients who say, yeah, and we need that. You're right.
Mm. Yeah, I found that you can scare people away very easy in the sales process by sort of, the approach, differentiation, for example. It's not just a lick of paint. We've got to actually deliver something here that's different. We can't just say we're different. We have to be different, yeah. Which therefore, as you say, can scare people away. But then again, if you know that's what's needed, and that's why you exist as a strategist, then, as you say, maybe it's right that you say that up front, so that you get the right clients. One of those things.
Can I kind of qualify what I'm saying, by the way, in case I start getting death threats from the fantastic logos and designers, my creative partners who I work with here, that it is a hugely important part of the process, but it should actually come at the end of it, not at the beginning. You know, it should. Great design, graphic design, goes way beyond, you know, the logos and word marks and typography and brand guidelines, and far beyond that. I'm talking about creative ideas and execution of your concept, of your positioning. It's a real skill. Those things should really enhance and bring your brand to life once you understand what it is, what your purpose and your positioning is. But it should go that way round, not the other way round. And so often with clients, it tends to not.
Well, how do you actually dig deeper and find out what the real problem is, and not just the surface level problem?
Good question. You know, typically you can, if you know what you're doing, and the best you brand guys do know exactly what they're doing, you can understand or diagnose, if you like, what the underlying roots or causes are. And you know, there are structures and ways of doing this, and we might go on to this. What we developed with the brand company was the 4Ds process, and it starts with the discovery D. And that discovery is really identifying what your core strengths, weaknesses, brand opportunities are within the context of the current trends and the changing dynamics of your market and your customer. And so it would ask big questions. I mean, from general to specific, like when I say your brand name, what springs to mind? So completely unfiltered, what's top, what's sticking, what's spurring with people. And you would ask that with different stakeholder groups or tribes, and you would look to see where the consistencies and the inconsistencies were and were not. And you would then dig deeper and, you know, would say, you know, what are the core attributes, what differentiates you, what stands you apart? You know, what is it that you promise ultimately in the core of your DNA? What's the overarching commitment that you make to your customers? Who are your customers? And how is that different from your competitors? And in what way are you expressing them? And those kind of things. So we devised a kind of quite a simple, what we called a brand health check, which would be our kind of entry in. And it would ask some of those questions to the key people, and at first they would scurry around, and you would throw often back to the left brain rational boards that we would deal with, quantitative numbers of sales and figures and things like that, and we would say, but how do people feel about your brand? You know, what is it that they think about you, and do you understand what it is that customers really value about your brand and where you're taking it? And they would say, kind of good question. I'm not sure we know about that. And they, you know, you could see that they would scurry to call their marketing people after we had left and get the answers. But some of them would know, and I'm not knocking. Some of them would be absolutely on top of their brands, and particularly the founder owners of their brands. They were intrinsic living, you know, spirits of the impersonation of their brands, and they'd articulate it very well. Those were easy, but they're becoming harder and harder to find. Well, less so with the younger startups.
Okay. So you touched on the 4Ds. Did you want to just go a little bit, give a high level view of these 4Ds? You've kind of disclosed the discovery phase a little bit. So what are the rest of the Ds?
The other Ds are definition, of the heart of which is your brand DNA, which I talked about a little bit earlier. And then, so that the third D is direction, you know, where you actually want to take it strategically. What are your goals? What do you want to target? And the last is delivery, which is how do you, you know, kind of dramatically accelerate the delivery of your desired brand experience through third parties and your own organization. It's a very, very simple approach and a circular approach, but it works. It's tried and tested. And, you know, one of the dilemmas that I have in here is like not trying to flog any one system or tool. And the 4Ds that we had was intentionally kind of an agnostic framework within which you can drop other strategic tools that weren't necessarily ours. We didn't think the little old brand company had the answer to everything. I mean, you've only got to look at the great people you've had on Martin Newmeyer. They've got fantastic thoughts and ideas. And that was actually the thinking behind Dim Sum Strategy as well, is that you can share in a kind of eclectic Catholic way this wonderful array of different strategic tools that we have used successfully, and our clients have told us that really helped us. And, so we've been able to wheedle out over 20 years the ones that we know absolutely resonate. And so that was the thought. The 4Ds is the framework, and it's a good structured process. And within that, you can go into more detail about the brand DNA and the discovery questionnaire process. And all of those have got formula and templates, if you like. And if listeners are interested in that, I can go into a little bit more detail. But it's not necessarily, I don't want to be one of those people that spouting off, this is the only model that works. You've got to do this, this is a lot of it is derivative, and you'll find good strategic models in different places. All I can tell you is it's simple, it works, it's very effective, it works for big blue chip clients, and it works for small startups, and it works for personal brands as well. So
I think that's why strategy is so powerful. It's about knowing all the tools and frameworks out there and then applying what is right for that particular client or project. So you pick and choose. And that's really why your book resonated, because you do outline these little tools that you can just put in your backpack, bring them out when you need it, and then apply it to that project, which I'm glad that you stated that about frameworks, because a lot of people, or our readers, or they'll ask us, like, what's the strategy framework? What do we use? We use this or that, or like what? So it's more about learning what's out there and applying it to your project. So, Matt?
I think it's important to say, isn't it, that I agree with that. And I know, Jacob, you obviously agree with that, with what Peter just said, because every business is different, right? And why is it different? Because you're dealing with different people, number one, in the leadership team, with different ambitions, hopes, backgrounds, opinions, thoughts, challenges. You're dealing with different customer sets and tribes, as you called them there, Peter. Yeah. You're dealing with different categories, and the complexity really of positioning a brand is huge. So for anyone to teach that, there is only this one way, I think is foolishness. Really, it's crazy, because you're never going to have the perfect storm. There's always going to be things that come out of the blue in the process. Somebody leaves, the CEO reveals some hidden secret that no one knew. It's going to change. So I think your approach is absolutely spot on. The tools. I'm super excited. Let's share some of these tools that you've discovered over the years, Peter. What's your favorite? Choose something, and let's bounce it around.
Okay. Well, I'll choose one that we kind of created ourselves, and then I'll choose a couple of others that are borrowed or that have been very successful and are relevant now, given the kind of uncertain COVID times that we're living in, and that will help focus people. So the one that we found was the heart of what we were offering was our brand DNA, which is the second D, the definition, defining what it is you stand for. We hear an awful lot about brand purpose and positioning, but what we used to do was we would go into our big client organizations and small, and typically you'd see their vision, mission, value statement up on the wall behind a bit of a glass, template thing or whatever it was, or you can find it on any website. And they were so generic, it wasn't true. I mean, the vision statements basically migrate to the lowest common denominator at the highest kind of level. Living healthy lives for people, making people happier, being the best place to work for and with, and delivering, or whatever it was, very generic terms that weren't actually differentiating things. Not always, but typically, and they weren't really following core definitions of what visions are, which should be tangible and stretch goals and measurable and achievable when you get there. So people were finding trouble articulating that. And the whole concept of brand DNA came around, looking at what can we do that is living and breathing, that can grow with organizations, but still defines the unique nature and characteristic and complexity of every organization and brand being different, as you were saying, Matt. And we tried to find the happy medium within that. And we identified 4 or 5 key things. The role, why do you exist? We did this was way before Simon Sinek. I wish we were as good marketers as he was. He's done a brilliant job. But it really was the why you exist. And we used to do that last because it's the hardest thing. And underneath that, it was the promise, the overarching commitment that you make to your customers. So it forced you to identify who your customers were. So you were customer oriented. And once you've articulated that promise, the benefit that your customers get from you delivering against it. And then we would wrap that up within what we call the spirit or the culture, the way in which you uniquely deliver that, which is quite often the way in which you differentiate it. And then, of course, there were icons and attributes that became parts of your assets as you built it up. But that was all like in a kind of velvet bag with a great string, and that became your DNA. And the whole of the discovery process is geared towards helping you articulate those 4 key things, the role, your purpose, why you exist, what you believe in, what you're promising, what your benefit is, your culture, how you go about delivering it. And so it would lead into that definition process. And the important part of that process was giving it to the client so that we would just facilitate a process in which they articulated and shaped their own brand DNA. And we knew we were successful in having done that when we started trying to take it away from them, and they'd say, no, this is ours. Let me try and give you an example of that. Shangri-La would be a fantastic one. They came to, it's complete luck, by the way. This is when we were in Hong Kong, and we were kind of known to be, one of the only Guilo consultancies there. Guilo is kind of like, white guys, foreigners, but even though we'd lived there for a decade, and they were trying to expand their brand out into North America. And so they thought we would have an insight and we would be able to help shape their brand in a more relevant way. And they came to us with these general symptoms again, an acknowledgement that they were kind of a little bit tired. They had a new leader in place. Shangri-La was the jewel in the family crown. They also owned Coca-Cola bottling plants around Asia and South China Morning Post and what have you. But Shangri-La was the visible crown, jewel in the crown. And they said, we think, we need to move more to a Western kind of model, and a bit like, we see what Hilton's doing and Sheraton, and we see the marble and the brass and all of this, and the Boston kind of look. And we think you can help us do that. And so, of course, we went through the process, and the first thing we knew instinctively was that probably wasn't right for them. But having got them involved in the discovery process, they quickly, realized in defining their brands that they were inherently not masculine or North American or brass or marble. They were soft, they were feminine, they were Asian, they were all Cheongsam and chandeliers and grandeur. And as we have basically boiled it down to an Asian Audrey Hepburn, very graceful hosts, and boom, completely changed and gave them the confidence. And we said, you shouldn't be trying to please or adapt. You are what you are. People who love you for what you are will love you for what you are. And if they want to go somewhere else to get a different experience, that's fine too. So that was the DNA. That's a long, long explanation. Do you want me to give you an idea of the borrowed tool? Or
well, just a quick question on that one, because I think it's fascinating, that story. But I have a question.
Yeah.
So in your view, when we look at, say, for example, in that story that you just gave, you just said, that they should have been authentic to who they are, Shangri-La, in terms of their approach, their culture, the spirit, as you called it. There are times, though, I imagine, feel free to agree or disagree. There are times when, it's a good idea to pivot and to change, your spirit, because perhaps the market needs that and it isn't differentiated. How do you know when it is a good time to change that kind of culture, that kind of spirit that you might already have within your organization? What would you say to that kind of question, Peter?
It's a great question. Here's the thing. I don't think inherently that brand DNAs of organizations or brands change. I don't. I think circumstances around them change, and I think potentially customer interests and things change. And the question is not, do you change your identity, who you are, and try and be somebody who you're not, but how do you maybe maintain relevance, or it would be a better one, but you don't ever try and change entirely who you are. Otherwise you fail. But knowing when, for example, to modify or make yourself relevant is one question. Knowing when to launch a new brand and be something else, a different, or define a new category is a whole nother story. That's a real challenge. So let me give you an example. Volvo, for example. I mean, I use that in my book as an example, Jacob. You have read, safety. They owned safety. And, I'm a generation or two ahead of you guys, so I can remember the hazy glory days of BBH, Bartle Bogle Hegarty, who, John Hegarty and his crew, who developed that crash test dummies, the original Volvo story. And basically, they were looking for something in how do we sell this ugly, boxy car kind of thing. With due respect, any Volvo listeners out there. But they actually they didn't have to search too hard, because the core heritage of that brand was built around safety, and was one of the reasons why they were so boxy, and they were the first to come in with seatbelts and all of that kind of thing. And so after years of building up this positioning of owning safety, and you remember that fantastic execution where they drove a Volvo crash test dummies through the glass window and boom and everything, tested by dummies, driven by the intelligent, or whatever the line was. God, I can remember that after 20 years. They in their wisdom went through 3 or 4 different chairmen, and they were doing their quantitative research and coming back and saying, well, look, we look boxy and we're not as stylish as the BMWs and Mercedes that we aspire to be. And so, we'll go and change our style. And so they went out of their boxy look, and they kind of moved to the norm and averaged to the middle, as it were, and did their wind test tunnels, and they start looking sleeker. And then they come out and say, whoa, look at us. We're Volvo, we're stylish. And people say, no, you're not. You're safety. Is that, that's why we buy you. And in fact, by that time, they weren't even the safest brand. In fact, it was Jaguar. You wouldn't believe it, but Jaguar, because the Americans had bought them and made them safe, and fixed the electrics that the British couldn't do, and all of that. And they actually had better safety tests than the Volvos did. But in people's minds, and this is what I mean about the brand being a territory in the mind, Volvo is safety. So if they want to do something that isn't safety, get another brand. Build another brand. If they want to make safety in a more relevant way, that's fine. You can deliver it, but don't sell on style. You are who you are. So that's one answer to your questions. You twist, but you never sell your soul. You are true to who you are. When you start getting into a situation where either through change, circumstance, or what have you, you're falling over a cliff, it's gone, your market's disappeared, or conversely, more excitingly, there's a huge opportunity that you can see to exploit. That's a different challenge altogether, and that's more exciting. That's kind of redefining a category and doing something completely different. The circus is dead. Long live the circus, Cirque du Soleil. Wow, what an amazing interpretation that Montreal group are. You can't do circuses, it's cruel to animals, people, blah, blah, blah. No, look at and celebrate the glory under still that tarpaulin and the magic of a real experience, but tie it in with magical storylines and things. Poor group, are suffering now with COVID and not being able to kind of travel beyond, television entertainment, which is not the same. But that's a great example of redefining a category and building an entirely new brand around that.
But as you say, it's still like rooted in the soil of the past, isn't it? It's not like they've completely come up with something, alien to their existence. So I guess what you're saying is you've got to dig deep, you've got to do your research, and you've got to find those things in the past that are kind of still relevant today, dust them off, perhaps give them a new shining, and repackage them to be relevant to the modern consumer, but don't kind of go somewhere else and try and reinvent yourself into something completely different.
Be true to who you are or what your customers expect of you. and deliver against their expectations. When it comes to truly generating new creative ideas, I'm of the school of thought that you can only create something new from things that are already existing, but there are techniques of doing that, and the great creative leaps of our time, and how I train people to do creative thinking. And from my great friend Wayne Lotherington wrote a brilliant book on flicking your creative switch, is combining or colliding unrelated ideas. So you take one thing and an unrelated thing and you marry them, and boom, it creates something completely new. That's my simple definition of what creativity is. Some people do it automatically. It's just there, it clicks, and they can do it 1,000 times a minute. Other people will never get there.
That was very nice.
Yeah.
So talk us through some of these other tools then. I mean, what are some of those borrowed ones that you've found useful in your work?
God, yeah. So some of the ones that I've borrowed, the turbulence model, Igor Ansof's model, that you may or may not be familiar with. Jacob, you're getting tested on this book now. You've had at least 20 minutes to read it. But Igor Ansoff, that's brilliant. The T model is so easy. You can get this in 2 minutes. There are 5 levels of turbulence from 1 to 5, where 1 is tepid, still, oxbow lake, hardly moving water, and T5 is beam me up, Scotty, white water, Niagara Falls, turbulence, totally unpredictable. T1 environments are very predictable. Everything you did today was the same as it was yesterday, and it's the same as it's going to be tomorrow. Things are in an ordered fashion. This is a predictable, easy climb. You know where you're going. It's progress in your way. It's very predictable. T4, T5 is very unpredictable. It's totally uncertain, or it's predictable after the event, but only after that. It's turbulence, so things are breaking the whole time, and you can't see the order or structure of it, of where it's going. But also, it's those magical times when things can be reshaped and built in a kind of different way. So some people are much more comfortable in a T1, T2 environment where it's calm and ordered and predictable. Others are much more comfortable in a more volatile, challenging, changing world. Anywhere T3.5 to T4.5, T5. T5 is exhausting. Nobody can last in it for too long. The advertising world, the world that you guys are probably in, is quite turbulent. T4. We would, constantly be challenging, and that's why it's an exhausting thing, and nobody kind of really lives after 40 in it. You burn out very quickly, and as particularly on the creative side, where the demand to come up with a golden apple all the while is there, and it's just not realistic. I would have people who would go on great runs like athletic teams, and they'd hit things out of the park, and then they'd lose form, not class, and struggle to come back. So that was a great model. Now, once you've identified, if you put a T1, T2 person in a T4, T5 environment, what happens?
They can't cope.
It's huge anxiety, and they can't cope. They have nervous breakdowns. They collapse and they move out. What happens if you put a T4, T5 person in a T1, T2 environment?
They get bored out of their minds.
They plot revolution, mate.
I've got this model already. Look at that. School by Peter Wilken.
You've done.
I'm keeping up, guys. This is wow. Something's happening.
No, so you're way ahead of it already. But so once you've got that, you never forget it. But you kind of think, okay, what environment are we in now? Think of the socio-economic and political environment that we're in now, with the kind of, let's not get too political, but how can we not? You think of the leaders that we've got that supposedly represent democracy around the world. Is democracy working? Probably not, if it goes by the caliber of people that we select to lead us. We've got COVID, which is throwing everyone into a tailspin, literally throwing the world upside down and reshaking every kind of value that you could imagine. We are in a T4, T5 environment where people don't have the answers, where people who are supposed to have the answers, governments and experts, don't. I mean, how many millions and billions of dollars have we spent on epidemiologists and chemists and virologists who are supposedly experts in their field, who can't tell us even how this was transmitted, 4 months after the event? I'm not knocking him, because, I'm not saying I could do it any better, even if I had studied it. But that is a definition of a T4, T5 environment.
I think as well, with the digital era as well, I guess you would say that puts us into that more higher accelerated, turbulent sort of eras of time. Things are faster than they ever had been before. Yep. Communication, feedback loops, change. We're in a quite an exciting time, but it comes with its challenges, as we're finding out.
Well, it really does. I mean, the rate of change is accelerating dramatically, and so this turbulence thing is coming back more and more frequently. And I'm honestly not sure whether I've got the answer, but one or two things I do know, and I'm sorry to go back. I'm not trying to plug this book, by the way, but it's kind of convenient because it's coming back. One of the things that I go on about this is managing this rate of change and unpredictability. We're in an era now where the information age and the younger Gen Z and belows want everything instantly and super smart and, mile wide, inch deep. And I know that's a generalization because they don't necessarily want to do that. But I refer it to kind of like Gladwell's 10,000 hours in 10 minutes. In fact, they don't. They want it in a 2-minute YouTube video. You want quick, boom, 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 boom. And the reality is, you can't. There's no substitute for that time. There is absolutely no other substitute to becoming an expert and knowing what you're doing, but doing the graft. And you don't become. You don't have the ability to, curl that free kick into the top corner like James Ward-Prowse is going to do against Crystal Palace next week.
Oh, what?
Oh,
what?
Sorry.
What has he just done? Oh, get off our podcast.
Oh, sorry. Oh, my God. Just
for listeners out there, I'm a South London boy, so Crystal Palace is my team. And just before we came on there, Peter was excited to find out that I was a Palace fan, because Southampton are going to be playing Palace at some point in the future. So so that was a little snipe at me.
Sorry.
We'll forgive you. We'll forgive you because I'm enjoying this turbulence model. So interesting really to think about that as a model. How do you use that in your work? Do you go through this with clients, explain it to clients, and see where they rate themselves in their category or their situation? How would you use that to add value?
I put it up in what I call perspective lenses, to say, look, how we view the world and how you start making strategic decisions in business or for your brands is impacted by the lens through which you view the world. So that's only one tool, the turbulence model. There's so many others, I would have to say. Generational lenses is another classic, obvious one, but we don't think about. We sit down there with boards and panels of old white Caucasian males, with one token female representative or whatever. I know we're making big moves to try and change that. And again, I'm making generalizations because the younger groups are not like that and don't think like that, but many still do. And you don't think that that does actually impose biases. And I mean, to give you an extreme example, my parents come from the greatest generation, World War II or post-World War II, and they would never think of ever wasting a scrap of food, whatever, and they instilled that in me as well. You can't have anything, must clean your plate. My kids, blooming heck, it's like, having a home ordered DoorDash, whatever they want, running restaurant, at home, it's completely different, and they'll leave half of it after. I mean, it's sinful to me. Those kind of things are attitudes deep rooted in generational lenses that, unless you understand or acknowledge, you'll carry a bias on. There are, so many of those. I use, my background is also psychology as well. So the whole brain thinking of whether or not you are an analytical thinker an organizer, a people person, or a conceptual creative thinker, that's the biggest one of all. And what the complexity of your team and your makeup is, that really does impact how you think and what your thinking preferences are and how it biases and imposes bias on your decisions. And, you know, one or the other is not better than any of the others, but understanding what your thinking biases are and your preferences are is absolutely critical so that you can create a more balanced team if that's what you're trying to achieve with your target. And in fact, that's what you should be doing, looking to build balanced teams. So I've just given you 3 quick ones now.
Yeah, they were awesome. No, thank you. Thank you very much. That's been brilliant.
I do want to ask about your delivery donut one there.
Right.
I love that.
Oh yeah, tell us about the donut.
The delivery donut. Okay, for these are, guys, this is super simple. If you ever get stuck on, okay, we've got where we want to go now, and but how do we start carrying it out? This is a super simple one. You don't have to go down the McKinsey 7S route, which is now turned into the 13S route or whatever it is. Think about your delivery donut. Basically, it divides everything you do into 6 segments. If you can imagine, if your listeners can imagine, I don't know if they're old enough to remember Trivial Pursuit, where you get that little kind of round circle and you get the 6 cheeses to fill in. Think of it like that. The top half of your circle is what you do. So it divides everything you do and everything you say. And what you do, yeah, perfect. That's it. You've got it. What you do, it should be done first. And that's what you do is through your products and services, principally how your brand is experienced. Your people, who are the kind of, what they think and how they act and behave within your organization and your stakeholders are absolutely key in what you do. And then the systems which enable or hinder your people from delivering your products and services are the third part of your do. If you get those things right, you're going to get most things right. Then you match it with what you say. And what you say is your external communications, how you speak externally to your communications, critically, your internal communications. And that is not necessarily the stand-up speeches, but the informal dialogue, your culture of what you stand for. It's what people talk about around the water cooler, not the scripted CEO speech. And then your design, your identity, your visuals, how you look, how you represent yourself, how you communicate, your advertising, all of that. That's your say. You chunk it into those 6 portions, allocate, go, divide, and conquer. And that's how you deliver against your promise within your DNA. And that's how we used to focus. Focus on the do, get the do before the say. So it avoids the trap of many advertisers, which is chest thumping. This is all us and talking without them actually having delivered first. If you are delivering it, talk it to the high heavens. You know, if you've got it, flaunt it.
I love that.
I love that. Yeah. What did we just say the same thing at the same time? That's really weird.
Well, who doesn't love donuts?
We both love it. We love donuts, particularly strategic ones.
Yeah. So that's that one. I've lots of others. The dolphin one we won't touch on. That's a whole nother hour in itself. The dolphin one. That's cool.
You'll have to get the book for that one, folks.
You can give us a short version of it, because I know you just explained it to me last time. You named your agency after the dolphin, so there's the whole theory behind that. Could you give us the shorter version of it?
So picture yourself here. This was when I was just new into running BBDO Asia Pacific, and I was trying to do a spin around of my offices that I had jurisdiction over, and I realized that nobody had actually visited Pakistan, no leader of our organization had visited Pakistan. Go figure. Yet they were small, but this extremely profitable operation that was pouring money into the system, and I guess it had never caused a problem. And therefore nobody had probably visited. But Pepsi was their big client, and they were complaining about the lack of creative quality and things like that, and they needed to get it straightened. And there were some big tensions with India, and they sponsored the big cricket sponsors, and so on and so forth. Anyway, so I went to go see them, and there was a fantastic chap there who I really admire called Imran Khan, who ran our office there. And when I got there, it was very clear to me, he was a player. He was extraordinarily well connected with everyone at every level of government, and every door kind of opened to us. The agency was, in fact, a kind of front for every other kind of activity that you could imagine. I guess I need to be careful what I say here, but when I was kind of saying we got on extremely well, I was a young greenhorn leader. He was a very experienced player. He owned Pakistan television, for example. Let's give him that. So all the UK satellite channels was owned by him. When I said to him, this was a Muslim country, so no alcohol, by the way, but it transpired that he seemed to be the center of distribution for Johnnie Walker Black, which kind of worked well with me. But when we'd established that it wasn't a core part of BBDO's philosophy to distribute arms to Afghanistan, but that we were focused on pushing, creative products and things like this. I'm not saying he was at all anyway, but it was, making up. It wasn't. I'm exaggerating, but we had this really good relationship. Anyway, he said, "I have a really important meeting, and I'm afraid I'm just going to have to leave you in my study. But feel free to read my books, and I'll come back to you." They eat very, very late there, so he left me there with a bottle of Johnnie Walker, and I went through his bookshelf and I found this fantastic book called "The Strategy of the Dolphin," by Paul Cordis and Dudley Leach, I think it is, and I thoroughly recommend it to anybody else. And anyway, I devoured this in 3.5 hours from cover to cover, and it basically said, here's the theory: you can divide the world of people, organizations, cities, countries into 3 distinctive types: carp, shark, dolphin. Carp, safety in numbers, bottom feeders, can live in murky, dark waters, but prefer it when it's clear, are happy as long as there's enough weed on the bottom of the lake to feed on, and they're not being predated on predictably by the sharks, can live to be a ripe old age, highly intelligent, highly prized. The best of carps are super intelligent, very sensitive to what's going on in the water, can read the environment around them, can direct, fantastic at processing, executing, organizing. You can live to be a very, very happy, wise old carp. And if the sun's shining and your lake is clear and there's plenty of food, it's a pretty damn good strategy to be a carp. You can become a very prized koi carp. The downside of a carp is that they can be entitled, obstinate, stick in the mud, lacking creativity, want a fair day's pay for a fair day's work, or actually real carp would want a little bit more than a fair day's pay for a little less than a fair day's work. But that's the world of carp. You've got it. Yeah? You can have big, little, medium carp. Shark, highly evolved, lean, mean fighting machines. Hungry, go out there, love the thrill of the chase. Show me the money. You're only as good as what you've delivered today. Get out there, show me this now. This is Gordon Gekko on acid. This was my dear old Pepsi client, so I loved to death. And frankly, when I was younger, I loved doing that sharky role. But very dog eat dog. And they rule by bark and bite and threat, and of course they prey on carp. They don't want it too easy. If there's so many carp, there's no thrill in it for them, but they want the right amount, enough to be able to chase and capture and kill and eat. And it's all good until the food source starts running down. And then what happens when they run out of prey?
Shark eat shark.
Yep. Yeah. Well, the Aussie would get that one. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm just still trying to figure out what a shark is, to be honest. But
a shark. Well, I'm telling you, you'll think of this. So you get small shark, you get middle-sized shark, and you get big old great white sharks. And when you've got a great white shark in your territory, all they need to do is put their dorsal fin up. They don't need to snap or bite anyone. They just know they can take someone's head off, and they rule with that kind of fear. In fact, they get very good at not being shark and trying to pretend to be dolphin, that I'm going to explain to you in a minute, because they don't have to unless they hit with another great white shark, and then there's a big fight of all mothers. And it can be great fun, and you need all of these co-species, by the way. So dolphins all-round, inventive, creative masters of their own universe. They're intelligent, they're communicative, they're sensitive, they're emotionally driven, they're nurturing, they look after their young, they look after other young. They work well independently, alone, or in pairs, or in pods of any number from 20 to 2,000 when they're fishing, and they collaborate, they use tools, they communicate well. In fact, in nature, the only natural enemy to sharks are dolphins, and dolphins kill them by collaborating them and suffocating their lungs, their nose like that. So in teams, the big difference between dolphins and the other two is that they can adapt so that they can speak carp language and they can speak shark language, but they're always dolphins. Shark can only speak shark, carp can only speak carp. So what's carp want to improve their world, they want it safer, they want it cleaner, they want more weed to feed on, they want less threat from those nasty sharks. What shark want? More thrill, more chase, more recognition, more reward. Show me the money is basically shark world. Dolphins look to create universes where all three species coexist in a much higher plane. You know, not just win, 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 but win to the power X, Y, Z. And where they can't change the world, like Douglas Adams says, they'll say, you know, so long and thanks for all the fish. You know, we're off to another planet. We won't waste our time. It doesn't take too many dolphins. So when I'm telling you this, you are actually thinking of people. You're thinking of organizations. You're thinking of how you adopt it. You know, it's a dangerous one to tell sometimes because, you know, people, they're not evenly distributed. In any population, what do you think is the split between carp, shark, and dolphin?
Oof, that's a tricky one. There's definitely going to be a few shark, like fewer shark. There's going to be a lot of carp. So I'm going to go, you know, I didn't know this was going to be a test, Jacob. I'm going to go just completely by gut. I'm going to go 80% carp. I'm going to go 15% dolphin, and I'm going to go 5% shark.
Good guess. Jacob,
Just
we
guess.
didn't.
80, 10, and 10.
It's typically 60 carp, 30 shark, 10 dolphin.
Oh, wow. So dolphins are the minority.
Fewer dolphins, definitely minorities. There are lots of pseudo dolphins. There are lots of carp that talk a good dolphin game. Yeah, we'll give it. We're altruistic. We're all the rest of it. But when it comes to the push, there's no backbone. They won't stand up. There's lots of shark that play the dolphin game. Yes, we'll talk the game. We'll give to the greater good. Yes, we'll do this. But when it means sacrificing their money, or they won't go, they'll get tested. Dolphins are truly altruistic. They will sacrifice their lives if they have to for a cause that they feel is worthwhile. They won't throw their lives away needlessly, but they will do that for the greater good. That sounds pretty, I'm not trying to get too altruistic or all that craziness, but the concept of dolphin-esque behavior and having more people think that way and having leaders that are dolphins, you know, it makes a huge difference. Now, do we have a dolphin leading our great free states in the universe? I don't think. What have we got in America? It's pretty obvious. Mm-hmm. What have we got in New Zealand? We got a dolphin actually in New Zealand. It's no coincidence, by the way, that all the progress is being made in countries that are being run by women. Not necessarily. By the way, the species don't go by gender or age or anything. And can you change to be a dolphin? It's a bit like introvert and extrovert. I think if you're a major introvert, you're not going to ever be an extrovert and vice versa. But if you've got dolphin tendencies, you can practice them and you can nurture them. And I think more and more people could and should. Once you recognize that lens, by the way. And does everyone want to be one? No. Do you need them? Do you need hunter-gatherers? Do you need salespeople? I mean, my brother is a complete out-and-out shark, and he's very, very good at it. You know, and he's made himself a wealthy, admired man, but trying to get the altruistic thing to help his impoverished sisters out is like a
wow, a little insight into the Wilken family there.
Yeah, there you go.
Let's not tread too hard into that area. I was going to say, I absolutely love that as a concept, and it's so simple in terms of the way that's framed, but yet so powerful. And I could see with a leadership team how that would go down, pretty well in terms of their self-assessment and self-awareness of their decision-making, which ultimately brands are led by people, right? So anything that you can wheel into a boardroom with their permission, of course, that would help them analyze themselves, analyze the marketplace they're in, and how they're going to behave is going to add huge value.
Here's the dilemma, Matt, because you hit the nail on the head. You use that last tool. I've shared that with your thousands of listeners or whatever it was, and I'm not ashamed to do that, because I think it's one of these illuminating models that changes your life forever when you get it, potentially. But you have to tread very sensitively when it's your client, and when you're very aware of from your own diagnosis that you're dealing with a shark. And that's okay, by the way. It's not. I've been a shark in my previous world, and I look back and I think, my God, did I do those things? And yes, and did I enjoy them? Yes. I don't want to be a hypocrite, but you do end up kind of coming back and saying that's actually not me. So you need to be sensitive to it, because I've done this before and realized that this is thudding to the floor with a group of carp, who are suddenly incredibly depressed. My wife is a super highly accomplished carp, and proud to be one. And so you should be. So you've got to celebrate your strength and what you are. But
my wife called me an old trout the other day. I don't know if that weaves itself into the model. I think this is fantastic. I mean, we've done donuts, we've done dolphins. Jacob, I'm just thinking about time, and being respectful of Peter's time. What got any kind of sort of wrapping up questions as we're starting to sort of close the episode to an end? Because I found it fascinating.
Well, let's ask this, Peter. What's your proudest project?
What a great question! Oh my goodness. We've done a lot of things that were successful, but not necessarily noble. We did some good stuff for UNICEF. We did a great campaign for Save the Tiger. But perhaps the most fun one. How risque can you be on this? I mean, these are brand guys. They know it all. They've done it all before. One of the most fun ones that we did was in our little agency, Ogilvy. That was my creative partner, David Guerrero, who's a great creative talent, whose own named agency now, and sits on the Cannes Lion board and all the rest of it. And we did a campaign for Trust Condoms out in the Philippines. And they were small clients, German-based. Trust Condoms were the equivalent of Durex or Trojan, top condom brand. And this is in a country, remember, gosh, it must be nearly 20 years ago, that was is Catholic and anti-contraceptions and all the rest of it. And our client came to us and he said, look, we've got a real dilemma, because we're stuck in a trap. The young audience that we need to appeal to, this is like 17-year-olds and below, who are actively sexually active, and they want access to contraception and they want access to more information about it, but they're being trapped by their parents. And these are very young parents. The average age in the Philippines at that time was 19. So their parents were still, mid-30s or something, but they were still holding them back because they had been held back by their parents. It was this, if we couldn't have it, you can't have it either. But it was causing huge problems. There was an HIV crisis, STDs, all of that kind of thing. And we called ourselves into a group and we said, look, we know as powerful creative communicators, we can make a difference here. We think the government have got it wrong. We think the church have got it wrong. We're going for the people here. Can you believe it? That the Catholic Church then was run by a cardinal called Cardinal Sin. I can't make that up. That is absolutely true.
Wow.
And so we went to this client and we said, look, we're going to give you a great campaign, but you're going to get into a lot of trouble, and so are we. And I said, so it was the end of his 3-year stint, and I said, you better warn your people in Germany that we're probably going to get banned, and you might have to get sent home, and we will get into a lot of trouble. But it's going to be great fun. It's going to be wonderful. And we had the media people on board and everything else like this. And we pushed the first contraceptive commercials in the Philippines with the aid of the largest TV station, who were our friends, who also agreed with what we were doing. And so we shot the first commercial, very low budget. If you can imagine this glass bowl, extreme close-up of a glass bowl and a woman's hand beating this cream to a lather to the sound effects of a woman reaching an orgasm. And as she was finally climaxing, we dropped this strawberry condom, and it's strawberry condoms. You supply the cream, so, if you get it. And then we had the chocolate one, which was melts in a hand, not in the mouth. And we had after dinner mints, and things like this. So we took their flavored condoms, and it went ballistic, if you can imagine. We had posters, TV things, death threats from the Catholic Church, all the rest of it. True, we kind of got banned everywhere, but it was all over the news, everywhere. And they got more publicity in 10 days than they'd had in 10 years previously. Huge. So when we got banned, in the Philippines, it was picked up by Chris Tarrant, if you can remember him. He had a TV show in the UK. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so he picked it up as world's best ads, and showed it around. So it got global coverage on this thing. And the nightclub group and this condom manufacturer came back to us and said, can you do a sequel? So we ended up doing a sequel with bananas, if you can remember it, this kind of conveyor belt of bananas. We discovered there's all different species of bananas, from kind of little pecker bananas to kind of normal sized bananas to great big wanging Jamaican bananas. And we'd drop this banana condom in and said, one size fits all, trust fund condoms and blah, blah, blah. So we carried the story on. Anyway, that was a fantastic example of what we believed in, which is the power of creativity to be able to change perceptions and make transformational change for good. There was no going back after that. They had to open up the doors. They accessed availability to condoms, the whole argument about suppression of information, the debate. The government changed their position on basically abandoning those people that were never going to change, the parents, and focusing on the youth. And it had transformational change as a result of being ballsy and risking our necks. It doesn't always work, but that one worked.
Wow, that was a good one to end on. Thanks, Peter. That's brilliant.
Dolphins, donuts, and condoms. There we go, folks.
Maybe that's the title.
Yeah. Thanks so much for coming on and sharing your thoughts for us today.
Thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure. And anything else I can do to follow up on this, or again?
Yeah, Peter, where can people find you?
Oh, that's really kind. Thank you. Yes, I have a speaker website. It's peterwilken.com. That's WILKEN, not IN, peterwilken.com. If you visit that website, that will lead you into the Dolphin Strategy website as well, and onto the book, Dim Sum Strategy. So, peterwilken.com.
Lovely. Well, thank you again on behalf of Matt and myself. Thank you for your time. It was a brilliant episode. And yeah, definitely go check out that book, Dim Sum Strategy. Tons of tools to dive into. So thank you, Peter.
Thank you so much. Send me your address, man. We'll get you a copy. Thanks, Jacob, for buying it. Bye-bye.